as time goes by, evidence deteriorates, right? They say that. But witnesses and things like that, they typically tend to open up after a longer period of time, after a traumatic event. So there's sort of a pro and con of coming back and looking at something that happened, right, back in the day. Do you think you could have made this film before? I guess you said you've been trying to make it for 10 years. Is this something
Well,
that could have been made right after it? Or,
no,
yeah. So, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
nope, no, nope.
Needed time.
And and the doctor who performed the X-ray technician who did the X-rays reportedly of this creature, first he said no for 7 years because we found him. Marco Leal, my partner, found him and went to the hospital time and time again. No, 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 I'm never going to talk. He finally went on the record, provided we shot him from the back,
Yeah.
disguised his voice. And at the end of it, he said, "Thank you for giving me that opportunity. I've been shouldering this burden for 26 years. Thank you." Like, I feel
Wow.
like
A
that a
relief.
weight lifted off of them. And they all said that to me. Thank you for providing this opportunity because I've been shouldering this burden for 26 years. And could you imagine, just put yourself in their shoes for a moment. Imagine if you had that experience. Imagine if you'd driven this ET around, just whether you believe it or not.
Sure.
Imagine keeping that from the rest of the world. That's the most significant event in modern history. I mean, in
Yeah.
fact, I can't think of anything more significant. Can you?
No, not again. No, absolutely.
So imagine how we would feel harboring, keeping that from the world.
Absolutely. That actually is a question I have later on down here at the end, but I'll ask it now. We're kind of here. You pivoted there. I was going to ask you if you ever saw, like, your advice to people if they ever saw a UFO, and what would you do if you saw a UFO? Would you approach it as your advice to, like, approach these things, try to
Well,
interact with them,
well,
and would you
so
tell somebody about
yeah,
it?
so the climate has changed since 2017. The New York Times published that former secret Pentagon UFO program, ATIP.
Yeah.
Things definitely changed. There have been people in the intelligence coming forward, people that were involved in the program coming forward, former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid coming forward saying, look, there's more to this than swamp gas and weather balloons. And the vast majority of significant evidence has not been released to the public. And that we don't think it's Russians, we don't think it's Chinese, and it's definitely not us. Those are some pretty powerful statements coming at very high levels. And you can't put the genie back in the bottle, right?
Yeah.
But so was what I try to get back to my point that I was trying to make. I think
Approach the
there,
UFOs.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I think you can now talk more seriously about an encounter. You'll be,
I don't mean talk about. I mean, like, if you saw UFO, do you recommend, like, actually approaching an actual UFO? I mean, like,
well, from
if
what
you
I
have, like,
understand
an
from
encounter.
everyone that I've ever spoken to, within a certain proximity of the power source, that there's radiation. And
So don't get near it.
my understanding, I'm just explaining from
Sure.
what I've heard,
Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
is that there is radiation, something to do with the power source. But I've talked to people that have gotten within 10 feet. I mean, there's a
So,
landing, and if you remember a case I covered in The Phenomenon, it was a landing that happened at a school
yeah.
outside
Yeah.
Melbourne. It's called the Westall UFO incident. It happened in 1966, and there were 360 plus witnesses that saw this UFO darting around in the sky above the school, and then it landed on an adjacent forest, like right over to the edge of the playground. And a handful of the kids ran, jumped the fence against the will of the teachers, and they got within, I don't know, 10 feet as it was sitting on the ground. And I interviewed them, and you know, it's so rare to get the opportunity to speak to someone who's come within 10 feet of a UFO landed on the ground within in broad daylight that you actually believe, right?
Sure.
But they said it made very little to no noise, little like a humming or a buzzing, and then it came up off the ground. I think about 15 or 20 feet, and then it pitched up to the side, and then shot off like it was shot out of a gun, out of the barrel, came like a bullet coming out of the barrel of a gun.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
And but yeah,
I don't
getting back to
know. I'd be
back to your
scared
point,
to get near them. I don't know.
yeah. Well, you know who else came kind of close to one, which is kind of fun, is that police officer Lonnie Zamora, who saw that egg-shaped craft, which I keep thinking about the Tic Tac, that infamous Tic Tac that they talked about.
Yes, you're right.
That's been in the news everywhere with David Fravor, the pilot. But this was 1964 in Socorro, New Mexico, and he was walking up to it when it took off. I think he got within 35 feet of it. But he was terrified of the propulsion and this blue, anyway.
Of course, I would just be absolutely terrified. I personally don't recommend it to people. I say get out your camera,
yes,
and take video footage, right? Like, don't get all Goonies on us. Just get the footage and send it to James Fox, right?
Somebody, Joe Rogan just posted something of a guy that had an encounter with a mountain lion out in the middle of nowhere, and this mountain lion was kind of come after him, and he was filming the whole thing. And Joe said, "I don't know about you, but I would definitely have put my camera down." But this guy had his camera out, and he's filming as this thing's coming at him. I'm like, "Oh my God!"
That's kind of a good point. That's kind of a good point. I mean, if the UFO's rushing at me, yes, I'm dropping the camera at that point. Well, it's gone.
It's unbelievable how many witnesses I've interviewed that said the last thing on their mind was getting their camera out. They were so.
I can kind of see that though too. You just mesmerized.
Which doesn't make any sense, right? When you're talking about it, you're thinking, who wouldn't? That's the first thing you do is grab your camera. People are just like,
I don't know. I've been in some pretty like crazy situations where I didn't grab my camera out. So I like think about your most whatever moments in life. You probably don't have them on film or a picture of it. It happens. You're in it. An argument or something emotional. I don't know. I can believe that, to be honest with you. That's like Neil deGrasse Tyson's almost famous for saying like, why don't they just pull out a camera grab an ashtray off the UFO? Okay, are we being serious here? Like, come on now. This is crazy.
So we do know that there have been very good photographs and video footage taken by the military, and it's been confirmed. I've interviewed the people that had it in their possession and then handed it over to the government. Of course, never did we see or heard from again. I had Senator Harry Reid confirm. They have film footage of a landed UFO circa 1957 at Edwards Air Force Base. Mercury astronaut Gordon Cooper went on camera and told me about it.
Wow.
Yeah, she saw the film. He didn't roll it, but he held it up and he saw a landed disc on the
Is that the one that came down where they were shooting something like a commercial or something?
Yes, they were shooting. So sorry. They were shooting the installation of F-86 fighter jet, like landing installation and landing and takeoff spot. And this thing came in and landed, and they turned their cameras on it.
I heard about that.
Yeah, Gordon Cooper got the film processed, and then he said he held it up to the light, and he looked at it, and it was a good film of a disc. And he got the higher up in Washington, D.C., and finally a courier jet came in from D.C., took the film footage, and never seen or heard from ever again. And I asked him, did you follow up on it? And he's like, well, how, it's classified, taken.
Yeah.
Nothing to follow up. I followed orders. I did it. That footage gone. Yeah. There are a handful of those cases from very credible sources that I've interviewed. So we know that there is good footage, that needs to come out. Even the Tic Tac videotape, you see the Tic Tac shoot off to one side. Your audience has been following the UFO phenomenon, that ATIP program on the cover of the New York Times 2017.
We have we actually have Lou Elizondo coming on as soon as his book comes out.
Oh, good.
Work that out with his people.
Yeah, we'll talk to him about it, because I've heard from him and others within that program that what was released, and it wasn't really released. Quite honestly, they found a loophole and snuck that stuff out of the Pentagon.
That's kind of what I heard. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's funny because when my film came out, the New York Times people called me up and they said, wait a minute, did Christopher? He said it very craftily. He said something like, we found a loophole but they found a loophole. I mean, if they'd asked, hey, we want to release these UFO videos, that would have never happened. They found a loophole. They did it. And walked those into the Pentagon. But apparently, according to people that were part of that program, you can see other videos that are not been released that are longer, and that these objects perform like shoot off at 90-degree angle turns and things of that nature that immediately eliminates the possibility of anything conventional. But those have not been released yet.